Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to go beyond just clicking add to cart. We're going to take a look at the world of e-commerce, specifically its recent growth and what that means for investors. So to guide us on this journey, we'll be looking at an article from the Motley Fool called E-commerce Growth is Back, 2 Smart Stocks to Buy. It focuses on 2 companies that are supposedly going to really benefit from this whole trend. And get this, we're not just talking about your typical online retail giants. Get ready for some pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Did you know that after this huge pandemic-fueled surge and then that slowdown afterward, e-commerce is like picking up steam again?
Yeah, it's almost like a roller coaster. And you got to understand these cycles. If you're really going to be investing in e-commerce, the Motley Fool article really highlights that, like how U.S. e-commerce just exploded in 2020 and 2021 and then cooled off. But now it's steadily climbing again. And this isn't just about like Amazon. It's about all the companies that support online retail, like logistics and automation.
Oh, that's a really good point. And speaking of logistics, one company that this article highlights is GXO Logistics. And they're actually the world's largest pure-play contract logistics provider.
So they're entirely focused on, designing and operating these warehouse solutions for retailers. They use some pretty awesome tech, too, like automation and predictive analytics to streamline the entire process.
It's wild. And from the article, GXO CEO Malcolm Wilson said, "We're seeing inventory levels returning to normal and demand for e-commerce capacity is accelerating." It seems like they're not just riding the wave, they're building the surfboard too. But what's really driving this growth? Is it just market share? Or is there something more there?
They're projecting a compound annual growth rate of about 10% between 2024 and 2027. So that suggests it's a bit more than just grabbing market share. I think GXO is really tapping into this crucial shift in e-commerce. As online retail gets more and more complex, more companies are probably going to choose to outsource, these operations to specialists like GXO instead of trying to handle everything themselves.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So basically, they're offering a service that's becoming more essential. And the article mentions that GXO is currently trading at 21.7 times expected 2024 earnings. Is that a good deal for investors?
Well, the article suggests it could be growth at a reasonable price opportunity. But of course, you always have to consider the risks. How dependent are they on their biggest clients? What if, a major player like Walmart decides to bring their logistics back in-house? We also have to look at the competitors, like companies like DHL Supply Chain and FedEx. They're heavily invested in e-commerce logistics too. So understanding GXO's competitive advantages and how they're differentiating themselves is really key.
Okay, so GXO is all about tackling that logistics side of e-commerce, like making sure packages get from point A to point B. But there's this whole other dimension to this story. Another company, Honeywell International, offers investors a different way to tap into this e-commerce boom.
Right. A lot of people know them for their work in aerospace and industrial solutions.
Yeah.
But Honeywell's also a big player in warehouse automation and productivity solutions. They're really focused on creating the technology that powers those efficient warehouses that GXO manages.
So they're kind of like the brains behind the operation.
Exactly. And it's interesting because these segments, even though they're smaller for Honeywell overall, have been kind of facing some headwinds lately. That slowdown we talked about in e-commerce related spending hit them pretty hard.
Yeah, the article mentioned that Honeywell's warehouse and workflow solutions business saw a 29% decline in the third quarter. That's a significant drop.
It is. What's interesting is that Honeywell's already seeing signs of a rebound. Their sequential growth suggests that as e-commerce spending picks back up, they're poised for a comeback in these areas. But this raises an important question. Why the lag?
Well, I imagine implementing large-scale warehouse automation isn't a quick process.
You're right. We're talking about massive investments here, often hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars. Companies don't just snap their fingers and install robot armies overnight. It takes time to make these decisions, secure funding, and implement the changes.
So Honeywell's recovery might be gradual, but the potential is definitely there as e-commerce keeps growing. But
what are some of the risks they face, though?
Well, for one, competition in the warehouse automation space is fierce. Companies like Dematic and Swisslog are all competing, so Honeywell has to keep innovating and demonstrate a clear value proposition to stay ahead.
So we're seeing 2 very different approaches to e-commerce here. GXO, the pure-play logistics expert, and Honeywell, the automation technology powerhouse. What does this tell us about the investment landscape for e-commerce?
It tells us that e-commerce is this complex ecosystem with opportunities beyond the obvious. It's not just about the retail giants. It's about the companies further down the value chain, the ones making the whole system tick. That's a really good point. So it sounds like investors need to do their research, understand the nuances of the e-commerce landscape, and look beyond the obvious players.
Absolutely. And maybe just as important, they need to consider the bigger picture. If these huge investments in warehouse automation are happening now, what does that tell us about the future of work in those industries?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore further in our deep dive today.
We've been talking about, GXO and Honeywell and all this, but
Yes.
love to bring it back to you for a second. Think about your own online shopping habits. How much have they changed, even in just the last couple years?
It's insane. It feels like I'm constantly on my phone ordering everything. Groceries, clothes. It's like having a shopping mall right in my pocket.
That's the thing. Every single click, every purchase you make drives this whole system. It fuels the demand for faster shipping, more efficient warehouses, and ultimately those tech advancements like automation.
Which kind of brings us back to that big question. As automation becomes more common in e-commerce, what happens to the workers? We can't ignore that human side of things.
Oh, absolutely. This is where things get a little tricky. There's no easy answer. Some experts think automation will lead to job losses, especially for those in, low skill, repetitive roles.
Like warehouse workers packing boxes all day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's another side to this. Some people believe automation will create new jobs, different kinds of jobs, requiring different skills.
So instead of packing boxes, those workers might be managing the robots that pack the boxes.
Yeah, that's a possibility. We probably need more people who can design, program, and maintain these complex systems. Engineers, technicians, data analysts, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's not just a simple robots are stealing our job situation. There will be changes for sure, but it's not necessarily all doom and gloom for workers if they can adapt.
Exactly, and that's where things like education and retraining come in. We have to prepare people for these changes and give them the skills they'll need.
That makes me wonder, what are governments, businesses, and schools doing to support this transition? Are there programs out there already to help workers adapt?
There are some, but we need more. Some companies are investing in retraining for their employees. Governments are looking at policies to encourage this and support workers. And schools are changing what they teach to focus on the skills needed in this new economy.
It sounds like a big challenge with no easy solution. It seems like we need everyone to work together, businesses, governments, in schools, to make sure this transition goes smoothly for workers. But beyond just the workers themselves, are there any broader societal impacts we should be thinking about?
Oh yeah, definitely. The rise of e-commerce is reshaping our communities and our economy. We have to think about the impact on local businesses, infrastructure, even our social interactions. What happens to a town when their main street is replaced by online shopping?
Right. It's easy to focus on how convenient and efficient e-commerce is, but we can't forget about those downsides, so.
Are we just supposed to stop shopping online? What can we do to help? Well, completely ditching online shopping probably isn't realistic for most people. But we can become more conscious consumers. We need to think about where we're spending our money and support businesses that align with our values.
I've noticed more people are supporting local businesses and artisans online. Is that a good solution?
It's a step in the right direction for sure. Supporting local businesses online helps them get into the e-commerce game while keeping our communities unique. Consumers can also look for businesses that care about ethical labor practices and sustainable operations.
So using our wallets to make a difference. Are there other ways we can contribute to a better e-commerce experience for everyone?
We can push for policies that help workers, invest in retraining, and make sure everyone benefits from e-commerce, not just a select few. We can also talk about these issues, raise awareness, and encourage critical thinking.
So it's all about balance, embracing the good parts of e-commerce while being aware of the downsides and working to fix them.
Exactly. It's complicated. But by talking about it and making smart choices, we can create a future where everyone benefits from e-commerce.
That's a really great point. We've talked about the potential of e-commerce, the problems, and what we can do to make it better. But before we wrap up, I'm curious about something. We focused a lot on warehouse automation and jobs, but what about everyone else involved in e-commerce, like the delivery drivers, the customer service people, the content creators? How are their jobs changing?
That's a great question, and one we'll get into next. Welcome back. So we've been talking about all these, the big picture stuff with e-commerce, but now let's focus on those people who are essential, but kind of behind the scenes in the e-commerce world.
Yeah.
the delivery drivers,
Yeah.
customer service reps.
And content creators.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about all the work that goes on
Yeah.
behind those,
Yeah.
easy online transactions. So how is e-commerce impacting their jobs? Well, for delivery drivers, it's kind of a mixed bag. On the one hand, the demand for their services is exploded. But that often comes with a lot of pressure, long hours, and sometimes not great working conditions. And then there's the whole automation question. Are self-driving trucks and drones going to replace human drivers completely?
Yeah, that's something we hear a lot about. What about customer service reps? It seems like so many companies are pushing people towards self-service online.
You're right. There's definitely a trend towards automation in customer service, too. Chatbots and AI, they're getting better at handling those, basic questions. So human reps can focus on the more complicated stuff. But that means customer service reps need to adapt, learn new skills to deal with this new tech.
So it's less about answering simple questions and more about troubleshooting or providing a more personalized experience.
Exactly. And then you have content creation, which is booming because of e-commerce. Influencers, bloggers, photographers, videographers, anyone creating that content that drives online sales. E-commerce has created this whole new economy for content creators. But it's also super competitive and always changing.
It seems like everyone wants to be an influencer. How do you even stand out and make a career out of it?
You got to find your niche, connect with your audience, and always be learning about new trends in tech. It's not just about having tons of followers. It's about creating good content that people actually care about. And that makes them want to buy stuff.
So basically, whether you're investing,
working,
or creating content, you have to be ready to adapt and learn new things in e-commerce.
Exactly. And as we finish up, I want to leave you with this. E-commerce is more than just shopping. It's changing how we live, how our economy works, and how we work and connect with each other. By understanding it and talking about it, we can use it for good while dealing with the challenges.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of e-commerce. We hope you learned something new. And maybe think a little differently about all those online purchases we make. Until next time on